Good morning and welcome to another edition of China 411. We have a terrific topic today. It's all about Chinese students at American universities, and maybe we'll get to American students at Chinese universities. We have a terrific guest. We have Mei Zhao from Stanford University. She's an educator and has some real insights into what's going on in terms of the relationship between China and the United States. And of course, my co-host, Z. Z, you want to kick it off with a comment or two, please?
Great, thanks, Ken. I'd like to share a little small story since I came to the States when I was 10 as well. My dad actually came to study. We were in Los Angeles. He was actually a student at the time, and to make ends meet, he was a motel manager at night. I remember when my mom and I first came to the States, one night we decided to cook some soup for him. So we made some soup and we walked to give him the food. And because in China it's pretty safe at night. And we're walking around, 11 p.m. There was nobody on the streets, as you can imagine. And then we walked past this 5-star hotel, and out walked this gallantly dressed couple in evening gowns, and they walked maybe a couple spaces in front of us. And we thought, wow, it's great, we have company. And then I remember hearing the car screeching by, and I thought I heard the sound of firecrackers, as when I heard it when I was small, celebrating Chinese New Year's. And then the next thing I knew, I saw this woman in a pool of blood, and the man was shouting, "Help, help."
Oh my God.
So that was
That's a true story?
That was my first drive-by shooting.
That is your first? Have you had others?
And I knew at that time, well, we'll save it to another episode, but I knew at that time I was in a brave new world.
People don't realize how safe China is in comparison with our country. Virtually nobody has guns, for one thing. So it's hard to get shot if nobody has guns.
It's harder to throw knives out the car window.
Yeah. Can I just add on another story
please.
to this one?
Yeah.
So I was just in Dubai to do an international program with our friends in the UAE. And after my work was done, of course, this is the thing you do in Dubai. You went shopping. The last night I went shopping mall, the Dubai Mall, for shopping. So in the clothing store, I ran into a Chinese girl. She's a salesperson in the clothing store. And she looked at me because we're talking in English. She's like, "Are you from China?" I said, "Yeah, I am from China." And then we started to talk in Chinese, ni hao, and all that. And I said, "But I'm now in the United States. I work there and live there." And she asked me, "Oh, really? I heard U.S. is really dangerous." My mom actually thinking, I really want to go to U.S., but my mom said it's really dangerous. Everybody has guns in the U.S., so probably it's better to go to Dubai instead. So that's just a really kind of crazy revolution of how people perceive, and then the perception can be so biased. Just add on to that one.
Yeah, I think it's accurate, actually.
It is probably in some parts of the U.S., but I feel pretty safe in Silicon Valley.
Well, maybe one time we ought to talk about safety in China versus safety in the U.S., because that would be a good topic. But May, before we dive into this, why don't you tell us just a word about what you do professionally, recognizing, of course, that the opinions you express today are personal opinions, not necessarily representative of Stanford.
Thank you, Ken. Again, my name is Mei Zhao, and I am currently working at Stanford University in the School of Engineering at the center called the Stanford Center for Professional Development, which is an executive education and professional education unit within the School of Engineering. So our role is really to bridge the university, especially School of Engineering, with the academia, with the outside the world. So we work with businesses, we work with universities and government around the world, and of course in the US, to provide innovation education to executives and entrepreneurs and aspiring students, working professionals around the world.
So one of the statistics that I read not that long ago, and I think it's right, is that there are about 325,000 Chinese students in the U.S. studying at universities here. at this point in time, this year. But I don't think we have any idea how many executives and government officials come from China to do some kind of advanced management training in the U.S. Do you have any idea about that?
So the demands is definitely there, and I know they go to many other universities, especially the name brand Ivy League universities in the U.S., and very eager to learn some of the latest thinking in terms of innovation, management, leadership related topics.
So there must be thousands and thousands.
Thousands, yeah.
Yeah, because Stanford's only one, and there are many, many other universities that are attracting execs and government officials. So going in the other direction, it's my understanding that this year there are only 19,000 students from America in China. And to be totally candid, I have no idea how many execs go to China for management training, but I've never heard of any. So I don't know, but I'm skeptical that there are a lot. Why are all these Chinese students, and maybe we ought to talk separately about Chinese students on the one hand and Chinese executives and government officials on the other, why are they all coming to this in such large numbers to American universities?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting phenomena, right? It's a very skewed, very unbalanced situation, if you would say. And there are many reasons, again, from my own opinion, that contribute to this phenomena for many Chinese students coming to the U.S. to study. First of all, American higher education enjoys a great reputation. And also American research, the way U.S. Higher education institutions work with their regional ecosystem to have this collaboration and foster the economic development and really strengthen the innovation scene within the respective region. I think that's a model that's really emulated around the world. So that's the one reason. Another reason I think is that China higher education, on the other hand, is experiencing a perfect storm. Since 1999, China higher education system really expanded the admission of senior high school cohorts. So before China, the admission rates is ranging probably from 5 to 10% of the senior high school cohort to till today, in at least 2013 number, it's about 35%. So this is within a very brief period. That's a huge expansion of higher education system. As a result, the students, the college graduates, go out and trying to find a job, and they find they have a hard time finding a job. So this huge discrepancy of increase the number or capacity of higher education versus the cold reality of job market, and make many parents or students very frustrated. So the frustration, number one. And number two is still this very arcane, if you say, system of Gaokao, which is the national entrance exam in China. And purely based on testing result, testing grades. And so if the cutoff point of college entrance admission to a certain college is, let's say, 550, I don't know what exactly the current scores, but then if you get a score of 549, you cannot get admitted. So as a result, many parents and students, they work so hard day and night and trying to pass this college entrance exam. But guess what? Everybody is doing it. So it creates really an arms race situation that the harder the work and the return on investment is diminishing. So many parents just feel fed up, and plus they don't really agree with this kind of rote learning approach. They don't feel like tied together with the job market disappointment. They feel like this, even with great effort, heroic measures from both students and parents' side, still it's probably the future is pretty grim. And hence comes American university, a shining alternative. And also it's a big business opportunities for many testing preparation businesses, and also for some broker firms that touting that they can do so much for you to get you admitted to the American universities. So, all things together, here we have more Chinese students. Another factor I want to mention is the current students are really the China one-child policy generation, and each family has only one child.
Oh,
so,
yeah.
And education is the highest priority for parents. And in China.
Yeah.
With the one-child kind of situation, this child enjoys all the resources she or he can get from basically six adults, mom, dad, and 2 sets of grandparents. And plus, this echoes or dovetails with the great economic development of China in the past couple of decades. So as a result, the parents has more resources to afford this opportunity. So anyway, all things taken together, this I think it's not surprising to see why there's so many Chinese students here in the U.S. On the other hand, it's going the other way. Why there are many U.S. students going to China? I would say that it's interesting. Again, multiple factors. First of all, U.S. has it's one of the most powerful countries. Has a lot of things going on, and it's in some ways not surprising to me because when I travel around the world. When I meet people from other regions, usually people know a lot people from outside the U.S. know a lot about U.S., not vice versa. So,
yeah, I think that's true.
So the U.S. Even in Silicon Valley, there are a lot of I met a lot of high school students, a lot of kids, very smart, bright, curious kids, but then. You ask them, why do you want interested in go to China? Not really, and a lot of people coming here. Why do I need to go there? And also, I think the language, Chinese, is one of the most challenging languages around the world.
Plus, you guys in China start learning English at a much earlier age than we start learning Chinese. In fact, we don't learn Chinese. So.
So I think. That and also China may have a image problem in some way. A lot of the news media report, of course, by nature, you report things that potentially sensational, potentially negative, and various events and ideology differences. And people think, well, why bother? I should go to Spain, or many kids go to Europe and perceived as a great culture enriching experience. But China, well, it's too hard. Why bother at this stage? And so I think that's my own view about that.
Wow, that's quite an analysis. Z,
No, I think
do you agree with that?
This is a very in-depth analysis. I guess what I'm curious is, you're having a lot of these Chinese students now who are graduating American colleges. And there was a term for these folks, the previous generation, called haigui or sea turtles. But nowadays, there's actually another term called haidai or seaweed. It's because a lot of these kids who are now in American universities, when they go back to China, they can't find a job either. Mm-hmm. And instead of, paying very little money in a public system in China, they're paying out $150,000 or $250,000 for 4 years. Why that discrepancy if they're getting a good education here?
Well, first of all, I think is there potentially some structuring imbalance in terms of job market, in terms of the current economy of China is probably still very much manufacturing focused, although the government and people realize and we need to change towards a more innovation-driven economy. But the reality is that the job market are still pretty much manufacturing-centric. So I think that's there is a kind of structural balance and in terms what level of talent you require for different type of industry currently the employers demand. So that's number one. Number two is, well, there is also a sense of expectation, I would say. I wouldn't say entitlement, but when this happened before in China, when college college education is perceived very prestigious. Once you get to college, you are almost all set.
You're set.
You're supposed to be set, and people need to kind of chase after me. I'm really a real de facto talent, and I can do a lot of great things. But the reality is, and people still have very limited skills in terms of job-related skills. And in some way, it doesn't matter you come to the U.S. or you come to China, you still need to have that period of real job experience to rise to the level I think that the employers need. And another layer relate to this, after the student get the education in the U.S., I think they're also changed as a result. So that probably creates some discrepancies as well in terms of employment situation. But again, having educated in the U.S. Doesn't automatically, even though it's a shiny ideal. Oh, this is really prestigious, is glamorous. But ultimately, when you come to the job market, it has to be a good match between the employers and the.
So are you saying that Chinese students that are educated in America are not necessarily as good a fit for Chinese companies as Chinese students educated in China might be? Is that what you're saying?
I think potentially that's a challenge, just because to give you an example, some of the management style expectations in China, still rather hierarchical, and the boss said, okay, do this, and don't even argue why. Don't try to understand why that's the case, and just do it. And then American educated students may find that very difficult to swallow in some way. I actually met a young gentleman. He's just, look at his kind of education pedigree is impeccable. He was educated in Tsinghua and went to Yale, get his MBA. He went back to China and then somehow find an employer in a private company with a private boss who never came to the U.S. Really, I see a huge culture gap with that. And lo and behold, he didn't work in the position for long. He left to an American company.
So I want to press that point a little bit more. Ken and I both had the privilege and the opportunity to go to Harvard Business School, where, at least in my experience, was we learned the American way of running a business is the way of running a business throughout the world. And one might argue that the past 30 years, we've seen a China that's so big in market, so big in its impact on the world, that there's potentially a China model, right? How are you guys, and you guys focus really a lot on executive education, bringing these Chinese entrepreneurs, business people, to teach them about what's great about American innovation and American corporate running. Is there anything that you're doing with your pedagogy to tailor that to this Chinese model? Is there a China model that potentially that would even benefit, American business schools here?
So it's a tricky balance. On one hand, we totally recognize that they're coming here, they want to learn something about US, about something unique about Silicon Valley. So they don't want to learn something about China. They know that already. So we want to give them the exposure and the ideas that are more unique here, recognize that this may not be the model, the way to do. This is how we do things. By the way, we have some failures here. There's case study about failure. This is successful stories. We hope to give you some ideas or inspiration so you can think about a certain challenge or issue in a broader perspective. And we, on the other hand, we tried very hard to understand where they are coming from, what their concerns are. As a matter of fact, in our many of our programs, the first day we put out like white paper, poster papers on the wall. We'll ask them to identify their challenges. So this way gave us a sense what kind of issues they're focusing on, or they, kind of keep them stay awake at night. I do think, by the way, those same executives coming from China, they're not only coming here. Now it's a global phenomenon. They go to Japan, they go to Germany, they go to Israel, they go to many pockets of the places that specialize on something, Industrial 4.0, Silicon Valley, Israel entrepreneurship model. You probably, can touch upon that a little bit before. So they want to just get a full view of what exactly, people, entrepreneurs or executives in Germany probably just very different, have different view than us here or in Japan or Korea or of course China. So we feel like we want to give them as much an authentic representation of the thinking and practice here as possible.
Kind of begs the question if we shouldn't be doing that too, huh? Sending our executives to different countries to get exposure to different approaches. Yep. But I'm curious, do you get feedback from these Chinese executives after the program in terms of what do they think about what they learned, and what do they think about how it compares with some of the things they may have learned in other countries?
From other places.
I'd be really curious as to.
So it's really interesting to see this kind of dichotomy going on. And of course, and people say, well, we learned a lot. It's fascinating how you approach innovation, but really it's not applicable in China's situation. This is not going to happen. This is not going to happen. We can't do this. We can't do that. So that's something. In some way, it's natural. You can't expect 1 week or 2 weeks of program that will completely change how they do things. But it's also a little bit sad in a way. Innovation is about trying to do things in a very difficult situation, trying to push it through. But some people feel they just kind of think it's completely impossible in China.
May, one of the things I'm really curious about is we know from the press that in China today, there is an active campaign against Western values. And in fact, it's quite widely discussed that these Western values are considered by many, in the party in particular, to represent a danger for the Chinese system. And yet, on the other hand, there are so many students coming to these American universities. In many cases, they're the children of very high-level party officials. In fact, Xi Jinping's daughter went to Harvard. How does that rhyme anyway? Do these students, are they tainted by Western values when they come back, or is there really nothing to worry about from a Chinese point of view?
Again, the China point of view is a kind of a tricky word because China could be have multiple multiple type of people. There's a China, which is the country, the China which different type of people, and the China probably you think of the government.
Right.
So it's really put together all this together, I think it's very difficult to really untangle them and to talk about the issue. I don't think is a problem. I think is again, using my own perspective, my own experience, I am an international student from China coming to U.S. A little bit, a while ago, I would say, not among the latest wave of Chinese students. At that time when I came, there are a few Chinese students, and people work really hard, really appreciative about this opportunity coming to the U.S. Nowadays, there are more students, and especially there are a lot of students with financial means. I think it's in some ways sad to see people think or have this potential mentality that everything can be bought by money. Including education. I think that probably contributed to some of the unfortunate incidents like cheating of students in the U.S. Colleges and universities. But I do think you have to come to a country to really understand what people think. Otherwise, you fall into this trap of, in a very black and white or superficial view of what really is. So I can assure you, when a person comes here after a year, they will have much a broader or in-depth understanding what exactly democracy means. Not just talking about, but democracy is the best thing ever, but also has a closer view of its strength and weaknesses of democracy, and then taking into your own culture background, where you are from, your culture and country's value. There might be some, that I think that would encourage more thinking, more at least perspective, understanding what exactly this thing is, not to really think it's the best thing ever or it's the worst thing ever. I think there will be a more balanced, multifaceted, perplexed view.
See, I know you have another question here.
I feel like we can talk about this forever, but to respect your time, I do have one question which kind of borders on what you just said. For a lot of American companies, the likes of Apple, General Motors, China is becoming probably the most important market outside of the US. And this is true for a huge variety of American companies. But we know, especially here in Silicon Valley, many of the best American technology companies have failed miserably in China, whether it be Google or Yahoo or eBay, the list goes on. In terms of the pedagogy, what can we teach executives here so that they're better prepared for this very important market? Of course, I think sending them to China would be a great way, but outside of that, what can American universities
teach
do?
them before we send them,
Yeah,
so
exactly.
that they know
Exactly.
something before they arrive.
Remedial education on
Yeah.
China 1.0.
I think that's really a good question.
I think that's a good question. I think I would be surprised if the companies like Apple or Google are not doing something like that internally. Probably not seeking the help from Stanford or other brand name institutions, but I would suspect they have some internal effort, either by bringing in China expert to interact with the engineerings and executives in this area. But I do feel the culture gap is significant, and people need to, I feel like it develop a genuine view or understanding where China comes from, what its challenges and what its fear, and trying to respect that, and with that serves a foundation.
Well, thank you. That's another episode for China 411. I want to say a big thank you to our guest, Mei Zhao, and thank you for spending time with us. Until next time,